What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going a full in-depth guide on the new Ebmx X-9000 controller that we installed on Reed's bike in our last video. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. We do a full install and now we're going to do like a full guide as to doing firmware updates, display firmware updates. We're going to show you how to tune your controller, what to mess with, what not to mess with, and how to have a ton of fun with the literal best Talaria Surron controller we've ever tried. And we've tried quite a few, and this one is the best, and that's why it's on all of our bikes right here. Alex is missing a heat sink because there's a little surprise coming later on. It might be changing color. Real quick, before we start teaching you how to tune this controller, Reed, how has your experience been the last week of having the X-9000?
It's been absolutely amazing. I love the power. I got the controller tuned so it feels just like the Sting R, which I loved, just way more power, way faster.
Yeah, we did a big group trail ride in Ogden at this awesome ride the other day. A couple other YouTubers out, and we just had a blast on all of our controllers. Not a single issue, super fun. Okay, let's dive in. We're gonna learn how to do all that tuning and the firmware updates. Hit that subscribe button, let's get into it. Reminder that the Ebmx X-9000 is compatible with a ton of bikes, and we're going to be going over a lot of stuff today that's going to work on a wide variety of bikes, including Talaria Sting R, as you see here, Surron Light B, Talaria Sting MX3, Surron Ultra B, pretty much any bike that you could put this on. A lot of this info is going to be helpful to you, so keep watching. And if you're interested in purchasing this controller, we have the only discount code available, I think, in the world for an Ebmx X-9000. You can head over to Charge Cycle Works and save 5% off. That helps us out as a channel as well. We get a little kickback for doing that, so we really appreciate that. You guys get a deal, we get helped out as a channel. Let's get into these settings. All right guys, for this setup, we're gonna act like this bike has never been set up. So we're gonna do a firmware update and everything on it. So our first step, turn the bike on. This is like your first fire up session. We're gonna do a screen overlay here so you can see everything that's going on in the app. So I'm gonna start that right now. Okay, once you've got your bike on, go ahead and go into the Ebmx app. It's super easy to find on the App Store. You're gonna hit search for your device. You guys can see right there. Okay, we've got it named as Alex so that we can keep all our controllers separate. Okay, so once you're in, we're gonna immediately go to a firmware update, and so we're gonna go into our settings. We're gonna go down to firmware. So this is super easy. It's gonna check for an update. Alex has one, which is super nice. We're just gonna do it for him. So for this test, we need to make sure we have our bike on a stand because it's gonna do a firmware update, and then we're gonna be doing motor calibration, which actually spins your rear wheel and your motor. So we're gonna go ahead and hit update. We'll let it do its thing. So this is gonna update through the Bluetooth dongle that you plugged in on your controller. You can also update through plugging your bike into the computer and using their VESC Ebmx software, but I recommend doing everything on the phone because it is very easy and there's a lot less chance that you're gonna actually mess something up. So we'll fast forward through this process, takes a couple minutes, we'll see you in a sec. We got update completed. If for any reason it says update failed, do it again. Okay, now our firmware is up to date as you can see. We're gonna go back out, and now we're gonna go into our general settings, and we're gonna kind of select all of our bike parameters and then get into some custom tuning. So for bike type, this is a Talaria Sting R or MX4, so we're gonna go in and we're gonna select Talaria Sting. We're gonna go into motor type, and this is where we'll select Talaria Sting MX4 for this particular bike. As you guys can see, I'll go back in there. There is a ton of different motor options already custom tuned for this controller, and they're adding more really quickly. They're also optimizing all the tunes that are already in there. So if you don't see your motor listed right here, I guarantee it's coming soon. Go ahead and hop on the Ebmx X-9000 Facebook group, and that's where they're posting all this info on what models are coming soon, and you'll be kind of in the loop there. And if you have any tuning questions, ask a question there because there is some guys that know really in depth everything about this controller and they will help you out. Super nice guys. Next, we're gonna go and select what type of battery we have. So you can pick between 60 volt, 72 volt, and 82 volt. We're running a Charge Cycle Works 72 volt on this bike. So we're gonna select 72. And then you're gonna select your battery model. So in this case, we're doing a 72 volt Ebmx stock harness. That means that we have a stock wiring harness on our bike, and that essentially limits and adds in a couple of safe precautions as far as power outputs so that we don't blow fuses, blow wires, and push the bike harder than it should be pushed. So in that case, we're gonna run this. If you have a stock Talaria battery, there's an option for that. Stock Ultra B, a lot of different options to choose from. After that, you can set your street mode and race mode battery current limits. Now these essentially are just letting you change in some later settings that I'll show you in a second, how much power you can run. We've been pretty much sticking to race mode, and so we turn our race mode current limit all the way up to the max of 250 amps, and then we'll actually set our power levels for each specific race mode, 1, 2, and 3, in a second. So I go up to 250. Your next step is your gear ratio setting. So this is essentially telling your speedometer to be accurate based on what size wheels you have, what size tires you have. Alex is running an 18 21-inch wheel set. The back tire is really the one that matters here because it is just basically how fast it is spinning compared to how fast you're actually going and whatnot. I'm not going to go in depth on how to measure that, but you can basically play with it, use a GPS, and try to get your speedometer as accurate as possible. Next, we've got our temperature units, so you can set these up however you want, Fahrenheit or Celsius. If you want speed, you want miles per hour or kilometers per hour. You've got motor direction, anti-clockwise. We're gonna leave that because that's the way this motor is supposed to spin. Stock switch as reverse gear, that means that you can push your start button and actually have that be your reverse gear, when normally if you scroll down in the display, you go to R. So we're in reverse now, and then you just do your throttle and it will actually be in reverse. So you can see it actually will spin there. I like to just leave it on this display. I don't really want to bump my start button and have it go into reverse. So now we're going to hit save. Save completed. Now it asks us, in the latest firmware, you can actually calibrate your motor right from this page, which is super nice. So now we're going to make sure nothing is obstructing our wheel from turning. We're going to hit yes, hit start, and this is an encoder calibration. So this essentially tests the motor in the controller. It'll spin your wheel forwards a little bit and backwards a little bit, make sure everything is smooth. So we'll skip to the end, show you what's next. Okay, successfully calibrated. We're gonna hit OK. Just go back and hit save. Okay, next we're gonna go into our throttle section, go over all those details. So on the top here, you'll see twist throttle functionality. We wanna leave that because we want our twist throttle to be a throttle. Next, you have off throttle regen. This is a setting you can toggle on and off for personal preference. This is when you let go of your throttle and have it return back to the 0 position. It will input regen, kind of like your stock bike did. Now, the Talaria Sting R has very, very little regen, even when you turn the settings all the way up. On a bike like this with an upgraded battery, that regen can be really, really strong. So if you want it to be strong on your off throttle, you can turn this on and then you can go and you can toggle this percentage. You can slide it wherever you want. Honestly, I'd recommend between 10 and 20% because at 20%, that's a lot of regen. It really is a lot. So you can play with that, see what you think. Some of us don't like that on at all. We want no regen on here because we have another throttle we'll talk about in a second. So go ahead and pick what you want to do, and then you can experiment with that a little bit. Next is our thumb regen throttle. So this you can actually set up as a regular throttle if you don't want a twist throttle, or what it's meant to do is for regenning and slowing down your bike as a brake. So again, you can turn this baby on and you can set your percentage. We'll go over that in a second because it's in a different section of the app. You can set how much percentage this brakes. On a stock battery, you have to be careful using this because it will trip your battery BMS. It will throw a code. It's not going to ruin your battery because your battery stops it from ruining itself essentially. But you cannot use very high regen because the battery just isn't designed to do that. Now on this like aftermarket 72 volt, you can brake so hard that it'll just straight up lock up your tire at high speed. Like you have tons of power control with this. So we'll get into what settings those are in a minute in the next app section. Next, we'll go to our throttle tuning. So there's a couple things on here we recommend you mess with and get feeling how you want to feel. I'll do my best to explain what each of them does. It's kind of a little bit complicated, but I'll do my best here. So first, we're going to do ramping time. So this is a measurement of milliseconds. This is essentially how fast the power comes in as you're pulling your throttle. So this is different from another setting we'll talk about in a minute called input deadband. So this is, you can mess with this, and this is like how long it takes for it to happen when you grab the throttle. So we like to leave ours pretty close to the stock measurement of 50 milliseconds. That means it's going to react pretty quickly. If you want it to be really dull feeling, that's when you would turn that milliseconds way up. And again, you can just experiment with that. Next is our negative ramping time. This is essentially the opposite of what I just talked about. This is when you're in the throttle a ways and you go to let go and let your throttle return back. This is gonna be your electronic negative ramping, where if you have this turned way up to say, 350 like I'm showing you here, it's gonna take a long time for your power to turn off. So you're gonna be going fast, you're gonna be in your throttle, you're gonna let go, and it's not gonna slow down. So we recommend you be very careful changing this setting. You can go up a little ways, like 10, 30, 50, and you're not gonna notice a huge difference. But if you go way the heck up there, it's gonna be a little bit dangerous. So just keep that in mind, be very careful. Stock is only 10 milliseconds. Recommend staying pretty close to that number. Next is our input deadband. This is a setting we recommend staying pretty close to because of the types of throttles that we're running on these stock bikes. So 3% is standard. That is essentially when the power comes on when you turn it. So at 3%, you only have to turn your throttle just a little bit, and then you're on the power, you're into it. You're into how that throttle is tuned. So 3% for a stock throttle is what is recommended. If you have a domino throttle or a throttle that has more of a voltage range, then you can go up to 4%, maybe even 5%, but we recommend staying very close to that 3% number. Okay, next is the settings that are actually gonna make the biggest difference in how your power comes on and how your throttle feels. This is gonna be your throttle expo mode. So you can see we have exponential, natural, and polynomial. So these are, if you're looking at a graph, I'll try to explain it here really quick. So if you're looking at a graph, you basically have a line of how your power activates when you pull the throttle. So natural, that middle one, is gonna be a straight line. So it's gonna be as normal feeling all the way through the pull as possible. It's just gonna be a total linear line. Exponential is gonna be a graph that essentially starts low and goes up like this. So it's basically an opposite curve of what most people want. So that's why the stock is polynomial, which starts at the bottom and ramps up like this and gets more extreme the further in your throttle. So the more you grab, the more power is gonna come instead of it being a linear line. So I hope that makes sense. Maybe we'll throw up a little graph. I don't know. I recommend staying on polynomial, but again, these are something you can easily switch. You're gonna notice a difference in how your throttle feels immediately. You can just experiment. Okay, the last thing here is our throttle expo. So once you pick your expo mode, then you can actually slide this slider positive or negative, and that is gonna change how that curve essentially looks and feels on your graph. So if you go negative, it's gonna make your curve be not as extreme. So your curve won't be as extreme, and you'll be able to have, it's basically not gonna be quite as jumpy. So I like running mine personally at negative 0.5. So that gives me just a little bit more of a gradual curve. I think it's a little smoother feeling. Some people like it in the positive side. So positive 0.5 is gonna ramp even harder. Some people like this for wheelies and just having the throttle be really, really snappy. Again, this is something you can try. I probably recommend trying the negative side first, because that positive side can get pretty dang jumpy. But if that's what you like, then set it up. It's pretty sweet. So I'm gonna set Alex to negative, what, 0.5 do you like? Okay, negative 0.5, we're gonna hit save. Okay, now we're gonna go back out and move on. All right, guys, I know this video is kind of long, but there's so many settings, and I want you all to understand really what they do to the best of how we understand them. So our next category is peripheral setup. So we'll click on that. This is essentially, you can turn on and off with this controller all the safety features that come on your Talaria Sting. So in this case, we have brake sensors. Alex already has those removed, so that doesn't really matter whether it's on or off. You can decide for each of these settings. Everybody kind of has their own personal preference, what they want to do. Some people want their brake sensors on. That is basically when if you pull your brake at all, it will disconnect power from your bike. It's kind of a little safety feature. We don't like it because it's really hard to wheelie with, and it's not that good for trail riding, so we turn it off. Your tilt sensor is a safety feature. It's a little sensor that's down inside here on the bike. That essentially, if your bike flips over backwards or tips over in an extreme way, it will cut your power as well. It'll throw a code and it makes you have to turn your bike on and back off. That again, most people are gonna wanna leave on, just because if you get bucked off your bike, you don't want your throttle dug into the dirt and your wheel just spinning really fast. It can be dangerous. Your stand sensor, that's for your kickstand. A lot of people like this on so that when they leave their bike on and armed and ready to go, if they stop and put their kickstand down and somebody grabs their throttle, it's not gonna go because their kickstand sensor is stopping that. Now, so you can toggle those on or off. Next, we have our 12 volt 5 amp power supply. This is going to be more for a custom build bike. You can put this controller on a custom built e-bike and you can add in and have it run all these other peripherals that we don't necessarily need because this bike is already set up with them. So we're not going to change anything in that front. We're going to hit save, go back out. The next category is diagnose. This is new for this latest app and firmware update. I'm not going to really go into much on here, but it kind of shows what's going on in your controller. Next step, we're going to go into modes and levels. Okay, so this is where we're going to get into the nitty gritty on how you can actually set up your bike, how much power it's going to have, and how much torque it's going to have. So as you can see, we have race mode and street mode. Now you can toggle between these and you can change all the different settings within them. We're going to stick to race, but everything is going to transfer over to street mode if you want to set that up. And we'll show you how to change to street mode in the display in just a minute. So first off, you got mode after restart. So this means when you turn your bike on and then back off, which do you want to start? So we like race to start, so we're going to set that up. So we're going to start with our power settings here. Stock, your race 1, which you toggle in the display while you're riding. You can switch between race 1, 2, and 3. So race 1 is 10 kilowatts, 400 phase amps. Race 2 is 12 kilowatts, 500 phase amps. Race 3 is 15 kilowatts, 600 phase amps. So that's a lot of kilowatts, right? That's already way more than you would have seen on your stock bike, and so it's already going to feel a lot faster. Now, we're going to talk about phase amps now. So that is essentially the torque that is running through your motor, and it feels a little bit different than the power does. So in this case, we've got 400 phase amps on 10 kilowatts. So that's going to feel fast, but it's not going to feel like as much torque as maybe you want. 400 phase amps is still a lot, but again, like your max limit here is 900 phase amps, and your max kilowatts for this battery and setting on the stock wire harness is 20 kilowatts. So we can run 20 kilowatts, 900 phase amps on this controller. So 400 is a lot on a stock bike, but for this controller and setup, it's not a lot. So these are settings you can mess with and then just feel how they feel. So I would recommend setting up, these modes. The starting point is actually not that bad. I like a little bit more torque than they give you. So on my bike, I am running 10 kilowatts and I moved it up to 500 phase amps on race 1. Race 2, I think I left it at 12 kilowatts and I went up to like 560 or 600 phase amps. I can't remember exactly. And on high race mode 3 with 15 kilowatts, I went quite a bit higher. I think I did 700 phase amps. So you're going to notice that immediately in your throttle when you switch modes. You'll notice that torque low down is there. Once you get high up into the RPMs, you won't really notice a difference because that's not when phase amps are running through the motor. That's when you're really using your power, you're not using your torque. Because if you think about it, if you're already going 50 miles an hour, you don't need any more torque to get your motor to spin faster. You just need more power, if that makes sense. So again, you can play with all these numbers, figure out what you like. Again, the more phase amps, the more torque you're going to have, the easier the front end's going to come up. The more power you have, essentially the higher top speed you'll get to a certain extent, but it's also a direct correlation with just how it all feels. So with all these power modes, these are going to change a little bit when you select different batteries and different wire harnesses and different stock bikes. They're all going to be a little bit different. They have these nice safety features built in as far as your max phase amps and your max power levels. So again, you guys will see the numbers that are limiting you here and you can experiment within those parameters and you shouldn't really get any fault codes as long as you're staying within those parameters. Now, if we go down to reverse strength, this is the percentage that it gives you when you go down into that reverse mode we talked about and you're actually doing your throttle. I like to turn that up to like 90%. It doesn't mean it's really fast. It just means it's a little bit more than 50. It's still really slow to only go 2-3 miles an hour even if you grab full throttle. So we're going to hit save on that. We're going to scroll back up and we're going to go into our thumb regen next to our power setting. So this is how much percentage it's going to do when you do your thumb regen. So I think 65 is honestly a pretty good starting point on an aftermarket battery. If you have a stock battery, you're going to have to turn this way down. I don't know the exact settings, but like we talked about, if you're doing regen on a stock battery, it will trip your BMS pretty easily. So you have to run this percentage pretty darn low, which is unfortunate, but I would imagine if you guys are getting this controller, you have plans to get an aftermarket battery in the future if you don't have one already. That's real nice. Okay, now we're going to go to speed limit. This is auto set to 124 miles per hour. You're never gonna go that fast anyway, so I would just leave it. Okay, now we're gonna go back out. We're gonna go into controller calibration. So we've already done a few of these steps, but we have a couple more to do. So our top setting here is our twist throttle calibration. We're gonna go ahead and do setup on that. Start setup wizard. This is gonna just run through this little process, and it's gonna just tell you the steps to do. So we have release throttle right now, so I'm not touching it, or I'm touching it, but I'm not moving it. Next we have press throttle, so we're gonna press it and hold it. This is gonna do our max throttle voltage and our min throttle voltage. Let go, hit save. That will mean your throttle is calibrated. Now we're gonna do the same thing for our thumb throttle, which is your regen lever right here. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and press it, hold, and then we're done. We're gonna click save. So now in this setting, these are gonna be some temperature cutoff points and stuff. These will be programmed into the controller, and depending on what battery and motor and everything you set, they select all these safety measures. So I would leave all those, I wouldn't touch them. Motor temperature sensor, leave on. Motor Hall encoder sensor, leave on. All right, guys, now we're gonna talk about field weakening percentage. Now this is a complicated topic. I'm gonna do my best to explain how it feels and what it does. I don't know all the direct terminology behind it, but I'll explain it so that you guys understand the best way possible. So field weakening percentage, stock is 45%. Now you can adjust this in varying limits depending on what battery you are running. That's pretty much the direct thing that you have to decide on, is which battery you're running, and that will tell you how much you can adjust it. Now how you know how much you can adjust it is by going, we're gonna go back out. Actually, I need to stay here and save this. Okay, we're gonna go back out to our general settings. Okay, we're gonna look at our race mode battery current limit. So we have set 250 amps. That is the max that we wanna run on this battery. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to controller calibration, back to our field weakening, and we're gonna do some math. So this percentage is out of 300 amps, if that makes sense. So 100% means you're running 300 amps of field weakening. So what the problem is here is you cannot run more percentage of field weakening in amps than your max race limit battery current limit. So our max race limit battery current limit is 250 amps. That means we need to run a direct correlating percentage that is lower than 250 amps, if that makes sense. So I'll put it up on screen. I think it's like 82% or 79%, somewhere right around there in this exact case. So that's the max you can run without getting some really weird motor vibrations, oscillations, all kinds of weird stuff at high speed. So we don't recommend doing it. It's not gonna help you out. It's not really gonna make your bike any faster. But that's the point of field weakening, is it's sort of a direct correlation of how much power your bike can actually use, and it lets, to a certain extent, it lets your motor RPM spin way up and gives you that really high top speed that you want. Now, if you're running a stock battery and your current limit is like 90 amps, because that's like how low it is on a stock bike, because 250 amps is like for 20 kilowatts, like that's fast. So if you're on a stock bike, you need to do that math and figure out kind of where you're gonna be, but it's pretty low. It's 5, 10%, sometimes it's even 0%. That doesn't mean your bike won't go, it just means you have no field weakening running. So in our case, we really like 65%. 45 to 65 is where we like to be. That's gonna give us a really fast setup. Alex, with this setup and a 54 tooth sprocket, is able to run about 70 miles an hour, which is spinning the motor almost 11,000 RPM. We've clocked about 10,800 RPM, which is stupid fast for a stock motor and a full-on setup. So that's pretty awesome. So we're gonna run that 65%. That's what we're gonna leave it set up on. Next, we have our encoder calibration. We already did this in that first general settings. It pops up and it makes you do it. So we've already got that set up. If you want to do it again, you can hit setup, run again. It'll do your motor forward and backwards. We're going to scroll down. These are all of our minimum and maximum battery voltage settings. Just leave these the way they are, and it basically ensures that your controller turns off and stops your bike from running before it ruins your battery. We're going to hit save. Now we're going to go back out. Okay, we're almost done here, guys. Advanced settings, you don't need to mess with that. You actually need a password too. If there is something you need to fix in here, go post your problem on that Facebook Ebmx X-9000 group and say, maybe I need to get into these settings, and someone will help you do that. Last, we have our firmware. We already did that. We already updated that. So now basically what we have left is updating our display, and we're going to show you what is actually inside this display, because even though it looks the same as a stock Talaria display, it's very different. It's custom tuned for this controller. All right, guys, now we're going to show you how to update your display. It's a whole different process than actually your controller. It's not quite as easy to do, but we'll show you how to do it. So we're going to go to the NRF Connect app, as you can see right here. And then once your bike is on, you can refresh this page, the scanner page, and it is called Top Me right here. Top Me 8 DAF. It's going to be called something just like that. You're going to hit connect. Okay, so we're going to go make sure that you're in DFU mode, and that basically is a bootloader mode to load new firmware onto this display. So we're going to go into Open Document Picker. I already have the 2 files saved on my phone. You actually need 2. You have one that actually clears the firmware, and then you'll actually load the new firmware. So we're going to go ahead and hit cleared. We're going to drop it on there, and so hit start, and now it is going to run its process here. It is actually removing all the firmware. So it kind of feels like it's a little scary, but I've done this probably 6 or 7 times now and I haven't had a single issue. Okay, so once you have that cleared file run all the way through, you're gonna just hit close and go back out and select it again. Then you're back into the file import section, Open Document Picker. We're actually gonna pick our firmware now and we're gonna hit start. So right now the display looks like it's off. It has nothing on the screen, but the bike is still on, and we're gonna run this new firmware, let it update. Once that is done, it should turn back on. You'll have all your settings and everything the same as they were, because all that is set up through that other app. To get both of these firmware files and to make sure you have the latest firmware, go join that Ebmx X-9000 Facebook group. They will kind of consistently post firmware updates for the display and for the controller. If you can't find them, use that search button or just ask a question and people will show you where to find them. They're kind of always updating, so I'm not gonna just link it down below because there's always new updates. So that was a success. You can see our display is now back on. Come show this, Alex. So we got our display back on. We're just gonna hit close and we'll just close out that app and we're good to go. Okay, we're gonna show you everything inside this display and how you can actually see what firmware version you're running. So we're gonna go ahead and turn the bike off because this is a setting you have to do, you can only do when your bike immediately turns on. So we're gonna go hold this middle M button and we're gonna go into, you can go to mode. This is how you'll switch to street or race mode. So we can go into street, go hit exit. Now we're in street mode. I think we can immediately go back in since it's still recently turned on. You can go to battery and you can look at those settings. You can do some temp settings, speed, info. So if we scroll down, you can get info. This is gonna be your display firmware 1014L. That is, my understanding, is the latest firmware you can have at the date of filming this video. Now we can go back out and we haven't really needed any of these settings really. We just go to exit. We're in street mode. You can actually toggle right here between all these different settings. You can do your trip time. You can do your motor power. That's immediate. So if you're on the throttle, like we could test it right now. So you can actually see that motor power. So you could see your motor power changing there. You've got motor RPM, motor temp, controller temp, trip distance. So that's basically how many miles Alex has ridden with this controller, 470. And then we're back to trip time. This is your battery voltage. So that's where you'll see your voltage. This kind of gives you a rough guide, 5 battery bars of how much you actually have. This is your speed, and then these are your settings. Street 1, if you toggle up, you go street 2 and street 3. If you want to go into your race mode, you're going to have to turn your bike back off, back on again, and then it automatically goes into race in this case because you guys saw that's how we set it up in the app. And if you want to go reverse, you toggle that arrow down, it'll show an R, and you can do your throttle, you'll be in reverse. All right, guys, thanks for watching. This is the best controller we've tried. It's not perfect. There's still a few little things that we wish we could change and customize. But for the most part, our favorite thing about this is it just feels amazing right out of the box. And even though there's a few little things we wish we could change, it feels really, really good and we're having a blast riding it. Now, our other favorite thing is that they are innovating at Ebmx so dang quick. They're adding so many motor options. They're tuning those motors constantly, even the ones that are already set up in the app. And there's firmware updates coming out nonstop. So they really are adding stuff. The app works, the best app that we've seen. I had a KO Nano for almost a year, and I could never get that controller to feel as good as this did with the stock settings as soon as I put it on. So I think that just Says all you need to know. This is a premium controller. You pay good money for it, but it's the only controller that we've really seen do everything that it's supposed to do. Like, people are running 35 kilowatts out of this controller and 900 phase amps. Like, that's like 45 horsepower. Like, people are actually getting those numbers out of this controller. It's extremely impressive. I can't wait to see where they continue to go with the X-9000 because it is dialed in already, and I just know it's gonna keep getting better and better and better. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful in setting up your X-9000. We've got some more cool ride videos coming soon. It's kind of getting cold. We're wearing our hoodies. I think winter's coming in Utah, but we have amazing fall leaves right now, so we're gonna head out. We're gonna do some really awesome trail rides. We're gonna go rip on our high-powered Talarias and have a ton of fun. We'll see you guys later. Hit that subscribe button too on your way out. See ya.